and especially thanking Uli, our hostess, for turning our home upside down and allowing me to be here. This is the second time, so I must have left a good impression with her the last time. I'd like to introduce you to Woody. Woody is affectionately known by that name to her family and to her friends, and she's my latest American import that I've decided to share my life with. So Woody travels with me now, which is very nice, and she's met an American compatriot here, so she doesn't feel homesick. Every time I do one of these, I try to vary it a little, but I don't get the chance because already I've been asked twice tonight how this all started for me. And I guess most people find it interesting. So the ones who already know the story had better go out for a walk or something and come back when it's over. But this started for me in about 1984 when I was living in Western Australia with no interest whatsoever in anything psychic. As far as I was aware, no spirituality. Certainly I didn't see myself as religious in any shape or form. And my daughter was living in Adelaide, and at that time we had a 4-wheel drive and a mobile home. And by trade I'm a pastry cook, pastry chef. So it pretty well meant that wherever I went I could work, because I don't mean to sound egotistical, but I was very good at my trade. And good pastry cooks are a bit like hen's teeth, they're hard to find. So I could go to some really beautiful places and work. So my life has always been one of movement. I've been a real nomad all my life. So anyway, I had 6 weeks leave to come, and I hadn't seen our daughter in 5 years. So we hitched up and took a trip to South Australia. And when we got there, it was a Thursday, and we got there in the morning, and it was a great family reunion. And my daughter said, I've got to go out this afternoon, I hope you won't be offended, because I really like what I'm doing. Well, my daughter's into the sort of arty, crafty stuff like pottery and painting. So I thought she'd found herself a new hobby. So I said, what do you do? And she said, I attend a psychic development group. And I said, what the hell's that? And she said, well, it's about meditation and reincarnation. And well, meditation appealed to me. I'd read about it, but I went along out of curiosity, apparently. And I said to her, could I come with you? And she said yes. So we went along to this little church hall, and I walked in with my daughter, and she introduced me to this little tiny old English lady, and her name is Mrs. Rosie Penn, and she's well into her 80s. And she came up to me and reached up and put her arms around me and said, I've been waiting for you. And I thought, oh dear. But I really think if Diane hadn't been there and it would have embarrassed her, I would have made some excuse and gotten out of there. But I sat in this group of about 16 people, and I didn't know what vibrations were then, but I felt very comfortable there. There were some really nice people, and there were some very sad people there. And there was one lady in particular that I remember. She'd lost 2 sons, one of about 18 and one of about 22, within 6 months in motorcycle crashes. And there were people there that had cancer, and there were people there who had lost loved ones, and there was a lady there who had a son with her who had been very badly smashed in a motor accident. It was almost a vegetable. And so there were that type of people there. And I got the feeling that, hey, they were very lonely, so they came to this place where there seemed to be a lot of love, just to experience that love for an hour or so in their week. And Rose led them into a meditation. which was interesting. I mean, I just sat there as an observer. And when it was over, Rose said to me, "Will you come back again?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." It was very nice. And she was English, so there was tea and biscuits afterwards, and everybody sat around talking. So the following week I went back and I took my wife with me. And so there's my daughter, my wife and myself, and a friend of my daughter's. And the same procedure. And when it was over, Rose took me down the back of the hall and sat me down like a little boy and patted me on my knee. And she said, "Dan, I want you to listen very carefully what I've got to tell you." She said, "Do you know that everybody has spiritual guides or companions?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, I have. And yours wants to speak through you." Now, looking back, in hindsight, I can't understand how I went along with it. I really can't. And she said, "I would like to take you out of this group with your permission and take you into a control group at my home." And again, I didn't know what the hell she's talking about. And I said yes. So, twice a week, we'd go to her house. And she's a little old widow lady. And she lives in this little three-room flat type place. And we sat around this round kitchen setting in subdued lighting. And the very first night I was there, I seemed to be able to get this knack of meditation. I could close my eyes and I could sort of regulate my breathing and then, hey, nothing. Beautiful. Just complete silence, blank. And it wasn't sleep, it was much better than sleep. And I'd sort of stir and come out of it, and I'd find that an hour had gone past and it seemed like 5 minutes. And that was fantastic. I mean, if that was the only thing I got out of it, it was great. And then the second evening, which made it the third week we were there, I was going into this space of really being relaxed. Now this is where you've got to expand your mind, okay? I got a voice coming out of my mouth that wasn't my voice and didn't have any connection with what I was thinking. Now I know that's a mind-blowing concept to accept, and I can well understand skepticism, but nevertheless it happened. It was very hesitant, and very guttural, and it took a long time to say anything. And I felt that I should say something and couldn't. And it seemed that whatever it is that connects our thoughts to our tongue didn't exist, or it had been cut with a pair of scissors or whatever. And Rose, of course, was delighted and encouraged him. Now, the only thing I can tell you about the feeling is that I've been a very fortunate man in my life. I've known what love is. I've had a beautiful family, and I've lived a wonderful life. And so I've known and experienced love, but not the feeling that I had when this happened. It was overwhelming. It was, I don't know, we've got millions of words, but sometimes there aren't words. And that was his feeling. And this voice, and I can't remember exactly how long this took or how many sessions it took, because as it progressed, I started to feel a sort of delirious feeling, like when you have a high temperature and you know that there's something going on, but you really couldn't care less. And then I lost it altogether, where there was just blank. And then when I come back, and again I hesitate to use these New Age cliches because I don't know, they don't fit comfortably with me. But this energy said that he was my brother, and the closest we could get to his name was Clearwater. And he said that we'd been brothers and we'd been Cheyenne Indians, and that my name had been Sun in Face. And that fits me because if I feel sick, then I'll go and sit in the full sun, and when it's 120 and everybody's flaking out, I come alive. And I worship the sun almost. And that fitted. But he told us about the dissemination of the tribes. And he told us that at that time I didn't know that the Indians call the earth mother. And he said that the mother was calling her children back, and that the tribes were returning. And they were returning reincarnated in us. And that as well as being reincarnated in the physical, they were coming as spiritual companions to many. That the mother was dying and she needed her children. And we were hearing it in our hearts. And it was a time of the tribes, because if we are to survive, then the ways of the tribes must return. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody lives in teepees and wears feathers and hunts buffalo, but the value of the tribes, where everybody knew their place, where everybody contributed to the benefit of the whole. And this was a story that we told. And he gave us place names, and that I'd never heard of. And he talked about a place called Greasy Grass, and he talked about a place called Sand Creek, and Wachita River. And we went to the reference library and looked them up. And Greasy Grass is the Bighorn, where the battle took place against Custer. And Wichita River was one of the encounters of the Southern Cheyenne, where they were massacred when the men were away, and they lost most of their women and children. And he talked about the destruction of the buffalo. And if you look that up, you'll find that it was a deliberate act of the American government at that time. They needed to clear the plains because of the mass influx of migrants coming in on the East Coast. And when they first encountered the Indians, they looked on them as splendid savages. And the titled heads of Europe would go hunting with them. But then, with all the migrants coming in, they needed to clear the plains. And the main source of food for the Plains Indians, who were the most advanced Indians, had to be subjugated. So they actually carried out genocide against them. It was a deliberate act. It wasn't by accident, it was by design. So this was what we found out. And it got stronger and stronger and stronger. At the end of 6 weeks, all this happened in 6 weeks, I went to say goodbye to Rose. And she gave me the statue of an Indian. And he's sitting cross-legs and he wears a full war bonnet and he's holding a peace pipe. And she said to me, "Please be careful with this." And she gave it to me, and I said, "Rose, it's beautiful, but I can't take it off you. You know, it's too beautiful." And she said, "No, you misunderstand me. That's not mine, that's yours." She said, 12 years ago, before I left England, Spirit told me to have this made and to look after it and to be caretaker for it, because one day a man would come and his brother would speak to him. And she said, "Here it is, it's yours. I've waited 12 years for you." She said, "I told you when you walked in, I've been waiting for you." So I went back to Perth, and what do you do with this? What do you do with it? It's a beautiful thing, but of what earthly good is it? So I can't remember how long afterwards, but an American psychic came to Perth, and her name was Dr. Verna Yater. And she was speaking at the University of Western Australia. So I went along to see her, me and about 200 other people. And the first part of her program was an audience participation thing. And she asked people what they'd experienced, and there were some remarkable experiences amongst these people. And I told her what had happened to me. And during the interval, she came off the stage and she came and sat beside me and she said, "What are you doing with this beautiful gift that you have?" And I said, "Nothing. What the hell am I supposed to be doing with it?" I said, "I've been to the spiritualist churches and that's not for me. And so what else is there?" And she said, "You must give your job up and you must go and talk to people." And I said, "Oh, come on. Yeah, don't be crazy." And she said, "You must start charging people. This is a beautiful gift that you have. If you were a talented pianist, you could entrance people with your music and you would expect to be paid for it. So whatever talent that you have, if it's a God-given talent, you're worthy of your hire. And money is energy, and you must look upon it as energy." And I thought, yeah, that's all well and good. But I had no intentions whatsoever of giving my job up. And she said to me, "Can you come to the States?" And I said, "No, I can't." And she said, "Well, one day you will." And she went back home and wrote letters of encouragement. And a few months after she'd gone back, a man phoned me up. And he said his name was Dennis Cosgrove. He was a friend of Verna's. And Verna suggested he come to see me. And Dennis is a dental surgeon. And he got interested in meditation because most people are terrified of the dentist, right? Well, at least I am. So he started to study meditation to help his patients to relax. And then that took him another step, and then another step. And then he got interested in channeling and in metaphysical stuff. So he asked me if I'd channel for him, and I said yes, I would. And then I found that on a one-to-one basis, very often that person's guide will come and talk to them. And that's exactly what happened with Dennis. And then for the next 12 months, he came regularly every Thursday after he'd had his surgery at 8 o'clock in the evening. And I met his wife, and I met his children, and indeed now they're their family. And then I had a sister living in London, and I had a letter from her son, and I hadn't seen her in 30 years, to say that she was very sick, and could I go and visit her. So we got a couple of tickets, and the big day came, and we got on the big plane, and it was the first time we'd been on a big plane, and we were like a couple of kids. And there were a lot of Bon Voyage cards there. And when I opened the one from Dennis, there's $1,600 in there. And a little note that said, "For the last year I've been taking, now it's my turn to give. Go on to America, go and see Verna." Because I wasn't charging him. And I couldn't bring money into this. So we went to the States and we spent 10 days there. And it was like going to Champagne. We went to Santa Barbara. And Verna was head of the Spiritual Sciences Institute of California. And I met a lot of people that had experienced channeling and I don't know, it was great. And at the end of the 10 days, Verna said, "Stay," and I said, "No." And she said, "Well, give your job up. Make a commitment. For goodness sake, make this commitment and you will be looked after." So on the plane coming home, my wife said, "Why don't you try it? Just try it and see what happens." So when we got back, I went to see my boss and told him I was leaving, but I didn't tell him why. There's no way in this world I would have told anybody why. And I started to charge people. And that was in 1986, November of 1986. In January 87, the man came to see me, and we sat talking after the session. And he said to me, "You were very impressed with America." And I said, "Yes, I was." And he said, "When are you going back?" And I said, "When I've got about $5.5 grand. And he said, "I'll give you $5.5 grand. And I said, "Hey, come on." And he said, yeah, I'll give you $5.5 grand. He said, "I've got it sitting in the bank. It's not doing anything. If you want it, it's yours." And I said, "Well, how do I pay you back?" And he said, "When you've got it." The following day he came with a cheque for $5,000. The next day I went out and booked 2 tickets and we went back to the States. And we stayed there 6 months. And in that 6 months we never spent one solitary dime on accommodation. We never hired a car. People opened their homes and their hearts, and it was incredible, it was a miracle. And then one day a man called Pravino, that I've become very friendly with, said, "You're not seeing enough of the States. There's a Volkswagen Campy. Take it and go and visit the Indians." And then the weekend I was due to pick it up, he phoned me up and said about this camper van, and I thought, oh God, he's going to change his mind, but that's okay. And I said, look, that's okay, Pravino. And he said, well, you can still have it. And I said, great. And he said, can I come with you? Well, that was like having our own personal guide. So we went up to Oregon and Nevada and Utah and Arizona, and I met the Indians. We stayed on the reservations, and I found that they would talk with me. And they're very reticent to talk to any whites. They're not welcome, not to any depth. And when I got to Tucson in Arizona, we stayed with a Jewish family, and their daughter was doing a master's degree in Indian Studies at Tucson University. And the head honcho there is a man called Vine Deloria Jr. And he's a full-blood Sioux. And he's the leading spokesman on behalf of the Sioux Nation. And he was born on the Standing Rock Reservation. Now, if anybody has seen Dances with Wolves, that's where those Indians came from, the Standing Rock. And Hallie, the girl that was doing the master's degree, said she was terrified of this guy. He's a giant of a man, and he's got a tongue like a rapier. He cuts people to pieces. He doesn't tolerate fools. And for some reason she found him telling about this Australian friend who channeled the Cheyenne. Well, the Cheyenne and the Sioux were cousins, and they were the ones that banded together to wipe Custer out. And he said to her, I must see this man. When he gets here, I must see him. So when I got there, they said, Vine wants you to phone him. And I thought to myself, great. Now I'm going to know whether this is bullshit, whether I am kidding myself, whether, you know when you go to a fancy dress party and you hide behind a fancy dress and your character changes? But I thought maybe I had something like this in me, that I was an extrovert, really. I wasn't the recluse that I thought I was, because I was a very quiet man. My family was all to me, and I had very few friends, and I enjoyed the isolation. And I thought, now I'm going to know for sure. If this man can tell me, then I would drop it once and for all, because he didn't fit comfortably with me. It was beautiful, but to sit and talk to people would terrify the life out of me. So I phoned him up and I said, Mr. Deloria, and he said, Dan, and I said, yes. And he said, when can we get together? And I said, when do you want? He said, tomorrow. And I said, great. So we fixed it so that he would come to the home of our Jewish friends. And he said, I'm sitting here surrounded with my ancestors, and I must speak with you. And then that evening there's a knock on the door, and there's another Indian, and his name is Al Logan Slagle. And he's one of the co-authors of a book called The Good Red Road. And if anybody knows anything about the Indians, they would have heard of Black Elk. And Black Elk spoke of the Good Red Road. And on the junction of the Black Road and the Red Road is the spiritual road that grows the tree of life. And the roots of that tree grows into the hearts of men. And he'd co-written this book called The Good Red Road. And he'd come to give a copy to Hallie. And I finished up channeling for him. Now he's a full-blood Cherokee, and he's also a Shaker priest. I don't know if anybody knows about the Shaker healers. And I'm not aware of what happens when I channel, okay? When I came back, the women are crying and everybody's very emotional. And they played a little bit back of the tape for me, and it was beautiful. The Indians are they're called Clearwater grandfather, and they speak so beautifully, and he to them. And he chanted at the end of the chanting, and the women asked him, my wife and my friends, what had taken place, and he said, well, the chanting was a one-off thing that was sung by the shaman when something really beautiful had happened. And he spoke in a language, and he'd spoken to Logan in his own tongue. And then the next morning when Vine came, pretty much the same thing happened. And he said to me, you might be a very good actor, and you might know a bit of Cheyenne and Sioux, but you couldn't know what's on that tape. It's impossible for you to know. And he said to Clearwater, is there anybody there that wants to speak with me? And he said, yes, there's the father of your father of your father. And this really beautiful voice came, and it was Vine's great-great-great-grandfather. And he spoke to him about how he could help his people. So this left me more emotional than I've ever been in my life, I think. And then he got me to tell them everything that I could about what he told us. And there are 2 books called The People of the Sacred Mountains. And it's the story of the Plains Indians. And it's very difficult to name an Indian, because the way they described it to me is you can call your son Fred. And as he grows, he can say, I don't like the name Fred. So he becomes he who doesn't like to be called Fred. And out of that, they might take he who doesn't like. So the Fred gets lost. But Clearwater had said he had 3 names, and that he was a member of a society that was a priest and a warrior society. And there it is in the book, the story of Clearwater and his brother, and all the proof I'd ever needed, but I hadn't gone looking for. So, please, I'm not telling this story to impress you. I'm trying to tell you as honestly as I can what has happened to me, because I don't really care if you all think I'm stark raving mad. I really don't care. And I've got no wish to change your lives. I promise you I haven't. But all I can tell you, with sincerity and with truth, that something is happening that maybe has never happened before. We're starting to scratch the surface of a power that's totally mind-boggling. It's going to take us into the most enlightened days that we've ever experienced. There is nothing happens by chance. Not the dissemination of the Indians, not the genocide that was carried out against the Jews. Nothing is by chance. There is a design and there is a purpose. And nothing negative happens to us in our lives. And believe you me, I've learnt that the hard way. There is a design and there is a purpose, and each one of us has control over our lives. And this spirit that we speak of, this world of spirit, is with us. It's not separate from us. And beyond that again is something else. And beyond that again. And this is my story. It appears to me that my life is a miracle, that I walk on this big roll of carpet, that I don't even have to look where I'm going. I just walk. And I've only told you a fraction of it. So 2 years after I learnt that I could do this, I started to do it full time, if you like. So that's 6 years. And for 5.5 of those 6 years, it has never sat comfortably with me. I always did it with reluctance. I never did it with pleasure. But over the last 6 months, I've had things happen to me that are even more inexplicable. I've experienced things, I've been to places that what I have experienced are very personal. I lost my wife 2 years ago. Totally out of the blue. 1 minute she was there and the next minute she was gone. Just as though somebody switched the light out. Never been sick. Never been happy. And then on that day I learnt that all there is now. This very moment. Because we seem to be trapped between the past and the future, neither which exist. That we are inseparable from all life. All life. That the earth itself is a living, breathing thing, as we are. And that life that has barely begun to evolve, to the most enlightened beings, we are part of all that. And this is what these beautiful beings are coming back to tell us. Now if you find that too hard to believe, that there can be a life, a dimension of life that is hidden from us, then consider a glass of water. If you'd have told somebody 500 years ago there's a lot of little creatures swimming around in there, they'd have A, said you were stark raving mad, or they would have burnt you as a witch. And then somebody invented the microscope, and there is this other world in this glass of water. It took somebody to invent the crystal set to find out that there are voices in the air all around us. The cathode ray tube to find that there are pictures here. So what else is there? Thomas Edison always believed that one day an electronic gadget would be invented whereby we could communicate with spirit, because we are all energy. And this is available to us. And this God, this power, this energy, this, I don't know what it is, but let's call it Him for now. This God, however you see God. I believe that He knew, because of our innate nature, that round about now we would need the wisdom of the earth people, what I call the earth people. The Indians, the Aboriginals, the Bushmen of the Kalahari, the wisdom of the Maoris and the Polynesians. And if you think about it, they were all subjugated around about the same time, within 100 years, which is nothing. And now they're returning in us. And if I'm right, then sometime in the future, and if we get it right, those that perished in the Holocaust will come back, and then there will be a great upsurge in music and the arts and poetry and literature and architecture, because so many of these gentle beings went in that Holocaust. The gypsies for one, who had this ability to communicate with things outside ourselves. So this is what we're part of. And whether you're conscious of it or not, that's what brought you here tonight. It's not by chance that you've come. Nothing's by chance. We've started a journey that will take us into realms undreamt of. And it's going to come out of this social and economic chaos that we're experiencing right now, because what is happening out there in the world is a reflection of our own desires. What we are seeking is freedom. Freedom to be who and what we really are. And to do that, we have to take our freedom back. And we give our freedom away. We give it to the church, we give it to politicians, we give it to ideologies, we give it to our lovers, our wives, our husbands, our sweethearts, our children. We give this freedom away. And it prevents us from becoming what we really are. So, if I have anything to do, it's to tell you as honestly as I can. Before God, I believe what I'm talking. I believe my words. I can't always practice them, because one of the dangers of doing this, what I do is that people very often lose Dan and see what comes through him. And very often expect more out of me than I'm capable of giving, because I'm like the wire between the power and the globe, if you like. Hopefully you get switched on. But that's my part in it. And never put anybody with psychic abilities on some sort of pedestal. Never follow a guru. Because if you do, all you're going to do is find them. And you're not looking for him or her. You're looking for yourselves. And that's what you're doing here. And out of this chaos is going to come. I was talking to our friend over here the other night. I know that there is a new morality coming in business and in our dealings with each other. And it has to come. Because what arrogance to think that we are the only species that are worth saving when we, without thought, annihilate other species. What arrogance. Because we all emanate from that same source. So that, believe it or not, briefly, is what's happened to me. My life is a miracle. When I thought it had ended, it had really begun. When everything that I loved wasn't there anymore, I decided that I would die, consciously. That I didn't want to go on. That I led a life that had given me everything I'd ever want. That there was nothing worth waiting around for. And then, hey, I found out all of a sudden that, how do you know when you've had the best? You suddenly start to live without restraint and without restriction. Most days I can do it. There are days when I get a bit of a wobble up. But that's part of humanness, I guess. Part of the learning. So, if anybody would like to ask some questions, please do. Because very likely what you want to know, somebody else wants to know, but hasn't got quite the courage to ask it. Shoot.
Could you repeat the name of that book that you said, Clearwater, is it?
People of the Sacred Mountain.
Thank you.
The two, when the historians realised that the Plains Indians would disappear, they had no written history, you see. They went onto the plains and they actually took ledgers, the cash ledgers, about so, and they took it down in longhand. Clearwater's name is White Buffalo or Medicine Water. He was what they call an elkhorn scraper. And he was on the earth around about the 1840s. But I believe that now when he speaks now, he's the sum total of all his incarnations. And he's retained all that wisdom. Whereas you and I, when we take upon ourselves a physical incarnation, we surrender our knowing. We surrender our knowledge so that we can face and overcome the obstacles that we're inherent to, and in overcoming them regain this knowing. That's how it appears to me. I would also like you to understand that I've never read any books because I didn't want any preconceived notions. If it was going to happen to me, then I wanted it to happen to Dan. And if I was going to make mistakes, then it'd be my mistakes and not somebody else's mistakes. So what you're hearing is, if you like, this homespun philosophy. It's what I've experienced. And all I can tell you is that if you let it, your life can be a miracle. I don't care if you're deliriously happy, you'll be happier. And if you're sad, or if you're sick, or if you're miserable, then you can turn it around. That's how powerful we are. And that's what these entities, energies, call it what you will, that's what they're doing now in communicating with us. They're helping us if we are prepared to accept it. So there are many gatherings, many gatherings. And that is why I like people to sit in a circle, because the Indians say that when the circle sits, nobody sits above another. I don't profess to be a teacher. I can tell you my experiences. And that's how the councils gathered. Because everybody participated, everybody shared. Nobody was the wisest. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Chief Seattle. Have you ever heard of Chief Seattle and the beautiful speech he made? When he was asked to sell his land, he gave this beautiful speech, and it's been recorded many times. And in it is the story of life. If you can get a copy of it, get one. It will move you to tears. And towards the end of it, he says, the whites too will pass, perhaps sooner than all the other tribes, because they will suffocate in their own foulness. And he said that 200 years ago. Now what they're doing is they're giving us a chance to get it right, because we are linked to the earth itself, and what happens to us happens to the earth. The healing of this planet begins with the healing of ourselves. It will flow on. And as well, there are other dimensions coming to help us now. That spirit is not separate from us, it is here with us. That there is no such thing as death. There should be another word for death, there should be another word for God, in my opinion. Because to me, God denotes somebody standing on a mountain pointing an accusing finger at me and telling me all the things that's going to happen to me if I do anything wrong. And it's not that at all. This God is part of us and we're part of him, or it, however you see it. So, I think it's time I stop talking. Does anybody else want to say anything? Shoot.
I feel there's a great amount of energy coming out of Australia. I'm not exactly sure what I wanted in terms of coming out of the land or coming out of the people from the land, or there does seem to be a resurgence of a great version of feeling coming out, and stories and people that I'm meeting, and I think a lot of people and other people are meeting here as well. In particular in water and feeling those elements as well. I just ask you, what's your understanding of how Australia is coming along in those ways? We've talked about it before.
I think the best way is to let me... I will answer your question, I promise. From here on in, I've got no control over it, certainly no conscious control. I go into this space where there's nothing. It's so beautiful that I don't want to come back. At least it's nothing on a conscious level. I've got no control over who comes or what they have to say, because since Clearwater first came, many entities have come. Many. I've lost count. It appears to me, particularly on a one-to-one, on an individual level, that the energy most appropriate to your needs at that time comes. Very often it is this person's guide or companion or helper or whatever. On a group situation, there are many different vibrations. There are the skeptical, there are the cynical, there are the fearful, and there are the true believers. So it's a very intense energy. So that every group is different, and yet every group is the same. Well, all I can go back to saying is that we truthfully are touching this enormous power of which we're part. And this gift that I have is your gift. The only way I can describe it in any sort of clear way is there's a man called Michael Benteen, an Englishman who's a comedian, and he used to be part of the old Goon Show. A very astute and a very beautiful man, and a very psychic man. And he believes that we're all antennas, and some are more finely tuned than others, that's all. And we're all capable of picking up these energies. And so please, don't see anybody such as myself as some sort of guru or some sort of enlightened being. Because what I'm doing is doing my level best to live my life as I believe it should be lived. And very often it puts me out of step with most other people, certainly with the establishment. I mean, once upon a time, such as myself were burnt or tortured or whatever because we threatened the established order of things. But we're a little more civilized now. Instead of that, we're treated with ridicule and scorn by the media, by the press, so we've become a little more refined. But the reactions are just the same. But these changes are being brought about by all of us. Our desire for freedom and to express ourselves as we truly are. So I will get rid of this gum. It's not a habit I picked up in America. I had this before I went, okay? So if anybody wants to stretch or whatever, please do it now.
Once you pass through them and see what's on the other side, then you come to understand the reason for it. But the trouble is, see, what you try to do, you try to avoid it. Instead of going through and experiencing and coming out on the other side sort of enlightened, you continually repeat it till it becomes a repetitive cycle in your lives. See what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Is this helping you lot? All right then. Who's next? We're doing all right, aren't we?
I have a question.
All right then.
Your wise friend who preceded you gave us a story about how the women on the planet would cease to walk in the shadow of men and anything else. Would you like to take his story into the future for us and tell us what the implications for our evolution are if this occurs?
Now, hang on, that's a bit of a dodgy one, that is. Because what you've got to understand is, there ain't no future, there ain't no past, all there is right now.
Thank you,
But-
thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah.
But what I can tell you is this, right? The old wise one says that women, like, have sort of neglected their responsibility, right? Because they allow themselves to be sort of subjugated, right? They allow themselves. Now, the reason they allow themselves, they've got to be afraid of their power. The enormous power that is female energy, right? Now, it's taken them up until this time to embrace that power and control it, right?
Yes.
Now, so what you're doing, you and all the others, of course, I ain't talking about you on your own, right? Bit of a heavy task for a little old you, isn't it? But see, little old you can be the example to others. See what I mean? That's how important it is for each one of you to recognise your own strengths. You don't have to do nothing then, because you automatically become like a lantern in the darkness, because you help somebody else without thinking about it. See what I mean?
I do, Chaz, but one of the things that arise to people when they decide to be different from the mainstream of consciousness is that they create conflict at different levels. Do you have any insight into how people who decide to...
All right, let's discuss this conflict at different levels. Explain that to me.
Well, I was thinking of at a personal, perhaps emotional level, and at a public level where you're negotiating in business and government. You have conflict when people wish to change, but when I wish to change and other people don't.
Well, you only get conflict if you react to conflict,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
In other words, nobody can make you angry. It's what you choose to react to that circumstance, right? So what you've got is a golden opportunity to remain within yourself in that tranquil state of knowing who and what you are and the powers that you have without sort of allowing your emotions to control you. In other words, not to react. To be sovereign unto yourself. To use this power of womanhood and intuition to know without any doubt the outcome of what you are proposing.
That's a tall order.
It's not one that's beyond your reach, though. Because that's the power that you are. In fact, that's the power that every individual is. Because you will only get confrontation if you go looking for it. See what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
In other words, be sovereign unto yourself. Because your greatest responsibility, all of you, is to take sole responsibility for yourself. In other words, that's the greatest gift that you can give all the ones that you love, but the universe as well. Because what you're doing is you're embracing your own power. And you're taking control of your lives and that energy that you've allowed to dissipate. See what I'm talking about? Now you all sort of line up to give your power away, like old Danny Boy was saying a bit earlier. But what you're doing now is you're lining up to get it back again. But see, what you're getting back is freedom, and some of you have never had that before. And it's a bit scary, isn't it? Because what are you going to do with it when everything you do, ultimately you're responsible for the outcome? You can't blame him and you can't blame her. See what I mean? Much easier to blame somebody else, isn't it? Always got an excuse. You can always say, yeah, but can't you? If it hadn't have been for this or if it hadn't have been for that. But what you're starting to do, see, you're starting to step outside the logic, because it's the logic what tells you about the things that you can do and about the things that you can't do. And when your logic tells you can't do something, then you're never going to be able to do it. See what I mean? Now then, have a think about this. There was a time, let's say a few years ago, that you couldn't have come here and sat with me because you'd have thought it was all bleeding balmy. But see, what's happening, your minds are expanding, they're opening, and you're becoming more aware. You're beginning to understand that you're not limited by this here, that you sort of expand beyond that, and your photography and all that sort of thing is starting to give you confirmation of it, isn't it? That you sort of glow. And you're also starting to understand that, sort of speaking, Verbal is the coarsest of all communication. There's far more subtle means of communication, and women are very good at that. Intuition. They're starting to listen. They're starting to perceive. They're starting to recognise their power. They all gone quiet again.
So where were you before? So that, I mean, are you around the hallway or up on the ceiling? To listen in on the conversation before, because I don't understand where you came from.
Well, now this is a bit of a mind blower, this one is. Right? Now you've got to bear with me here, right? Now, you know all this nothingness that's in this room? All this empty space, right? That's where it all is.
It's not empty at all.
That's right. You know what's in that empty space? What the old logic says is empty? I'll tell you what's there. It's the souls of the unborn. It's the source of life. It's everything. How about that? Makes you think, doesn't it? There ain't no such thing as nothing. How about this? You know the old speck of dust that you see in the sunbeam, don't you? You know what that is? That's a little world, that is. How about that? Makes you think, doesn't it? But you've got to go beyond the logic, haven't you? In other words, what you are is multi-dimensional. That's what you are. Now you hear that word, but do you really know what it is? How about this for starters? There are those amongst you that have done exactly what I'm doing now. How about that for a thought?
That's a good day.
See, now what we can tell you is limited to what you can accept. Do you see? In other words, it's your logic that's the barrier. And what you're coming into, like old David Boy said again, is the most enlightened age that humankind has ever experienced. Now, for example, there are those amongst you that have experienced every major civilization that humankind have ever experienced and seen its decline and assisted in the transition. And that's exactly what you're doing here, because you're good at it. But you've forgotten. And what I'm doing, and geezers like me, is trying to remind you, give you a little dig in the ribs. Jerk your memory on. In other words, nothing separate, nothing isolated. Everything's interconnected, like the fingers are in your hands, nothing separate. Well, I think I'll give you enough to talk about and think about. So I'm going to go now. That's a funny word too, because I ain't going anywhere. But see, we're sort of limited in how we talk to you. See what I'm talking about? Now, I ain't saying you're ignorant or stupid, I ain't saying that. But what I'm saying is, your minds are gradually expanding. And you're accepting more and more and more. And you're sort of expanding the boundaries. Until ultimately, you come to discover what we've been trying to tell you. That you're unlimited. How about that? Nice thought, isn't it?
Thanks, Chaz.
Thank you.
So what I want you to do now is when you go home, think about it a bit. And when you need any help, ask for it. and know that you're going to get it. Like our mate down here. See, because ultimately, everything that he desires he's going to get. But he's teaching himself a great lesson in patience. And he's doing it. I ain't doing it. I ain't laughing at you, mate. I ain't, honest. Because I've been where you are. And it's easy from here. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it's very nice, and you're very nice. And it's a two-way, see? Do you know what? I'll tell you something, shall I? Do you know you're helping me? Do you know that? Do you know I'm on a journey and all? Right you are. See? And the very fact that you sort of accept my help sort of comes back on me again. It's like when you give somebody a gift, right? You're the one that benefits the most, especially if that gift is given in love. See what I mean? Because when you give somebody a gift, you don't ask them what they're going to do with it, do you? I mean, if they want to open it and say, oh, that's beautiful, and use it, that's wonderful. But if they don't even bother to unwrap it and they chuck it in the back of the cupboard, that's all right too, because you give it in love, and you're not telling them what to do with it. And that's how it works, see? You put out for a little bit of assistance. You don't even know you're doing it, right? Along comes such as me, we give you a bit of a hand, and it comes back again. That's how it goes. It's like playing bleeding ping pong, isn't it? Bing bong, bing, goes back and forth all the time. Well, I ain't going to go now.
Thank you, Chaz.
So you take care, God bless, look after each other, be nice to each other. And that's the best way to get where you're going. All right?
Yeah.
Ta-ra.